Today, we're digging into a pretty big question. What if the most common rule for learning English is actually the thing that's holding you back the most? Let's explore a totally different way to think about fluency.
Yeah, I'm gonna bet that sounds pretty familiar to a lot of you, right? It's a rule that's been hammered into us in language classes forever. But here's the real question. Does it actually work? Or, could it be the very thing that's holding you back? So that brings us right to our first topic, this whole English-only rule. To really get why a new approach might be what we need, we've got to understand the old one, this long-held belief in teaching that's often called a monolingual bias.
I mean, the logic seems solid, doesn't it? If you want to learn how to swim, you got to jump in the pool. So if you want to learn English, you have to surround yourself with it 24/7 and just force your brain to figure it out.
Okay, but this is where things start to get really interesting. See that immersion idea? It works great for little kids, but an adult brain is a totally different machine. It's already running a very powerful, very complex language system. So what happens when we tell that powerful brain to just ignore everything it already knows?
Well, it turns out that this English-only method can actually end up building on a pretty flawed foundation. It puts up these roadblocks that aren't just a waste of time. They can actively get in the way of you actually learning anything. And this slide just lays out the conflict perfectly. On one side, you've got the classroom rule, screaming English only. But on the other side, you've got the reality of what's happening inside a learner's head. This rich, amazing toolkit of languages, maybe formal Arabic, a local dialect, and the English they're learning. Forcing them to shut all that down? It's like telling a master carpenter to build a house using nothing but a screwdriver. It just doesn't make sense.
And the fallout from this is, well, it's pretty major. First, you get what's called cognitive overload. That's just a fancy way of saying your brain is trying to do too much at once, learn a new word and a totally new concept at the same time. It's exhausting. Then, you're not even using the literacy skills you already have, the ones you mastered in your native language. And maybe the biggest problem of all, it flips a switch in your brain called the affective filter. Basically, a giant wall of frustration and anxiety goes up, and when that happens, learning just stops, dead in its tracks.
So, here's the good news. There is a much, much better way. There's a solution that doesn't tell you to forget your native language, but actually uses it as a bridge to get you to English faster and stronger. And this is it. This is our key idea. Pedagogical Translanguaging, or PTL for short. Now, I know it sounds super academic, but the idea behind it is actually incredibly simple and powerful. It's all about intentionally designing lessons that strategically use a learner's entire language toolbox to help them truly master a new one. And this is so important to get. This is not just, randomly mixing languages together. As the slide says, it is a deliberate instructional design choice. That means the teacher has a plan. There's a specific reason and a specific learning goal for using, say, Arabic in an English class at that exact moment. It's smart, it's structured, and it works.
And really, this is the huge mental shift we're talking about. Your first language isn't a problem you need to get over. It's your single greatest tool. It's the foundation you can build everything on to get fluent in another language way more effectively.
Okay, so this all sounds great in theory, but what does it actually look like when you're sitting in a classroom? Let's dive into some real practical techniques.
All right, first up, reading. We all know this can be one of the hardest skills to build, especially when you're dealing with really dense, complicated texts for work or school.
This table here breaks it down so well. Let's say you have to read a super complex article about supply chain management. Instead of just throwing you into the deep end with the English text, a teacher using PTL would start a quick discussion about the topic in Arabic first, get your brain warmed up. Then, as you're reading the English text, you could jot down little summary notes in Arabic in the margins. You're using your strongest language to make sense of the new one. See? It's a total game changer.
And guess what? This same idea can absolutely transform your writing, taking it from confusing and messy to clear and powerful. It's all about using your native language to build a rock-solid structure for what you want to say in English.
Okay, let's actually walk through this. Imagine you've got an essay to write. So step 1, you do all your thinking, your brainstorming, your entire outline in your native language, say Modern Standard Arabic. And why would you do that? Well, because that's where your best, clearest, most logical thoughts are. Then, step 2, you write the whole draft in English. But here's the magic trick. Step 3, you take your English sentences and translate them back into Arabic. And if something sounds clunky or just plain weird in your own language, boom, you've just found a weak spot, a structural error in your English. It's such a clever hack, right?
So if this approach is really that good, what's it going to take to make it happen? Well, as we're about to see, it's not just about learning a few new tricks in the classroom. It really requires a huge shift in the entire system.
For this to really work, teachers are going to need completely new training. First, they have to unlearn that old English-only way of thinking. Then they need to be trained in exactly how to use a student's native language to build these learning scaffolds. And, this one's huge, the way we grade and assess students has to change too.
Because at the end of the day, the goal isn't about speaking perfectly grammatically correct English right from the get-go. No, the focus shifts to something much more realistic and, frankly, more useful. Can you communicate effectively? Can you make your meaning clear? You get judged on the power of your ideas, not just on perfect sentence structure.
So we're going to leave you with this one last thought. For years and years, language learners have been told to leave their native language at the classroom door. But what if we've been looking at it all wrong? What if that language isn't the lock? What if it's always been the key? Something to think about. Thanks for tuning in.